I find it incredibly hard to sustain the pathos of this piece over its whole 3-4 minutes, which is very sad because there are so many moments of just absolute gorgeous, very passionate beauty in it, despite it being a very lugubrious piece. And I do choose that word carefully. It's very lofty. The piece itself is very lofty. I think the problem, the danger here is that the texture of the prelude is very blocky. There's a danger of it sounding like this. You see how many just chords? There's 4 voices. Do do doom doom do 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 doom. There's 4 voices. There's actually 3. We'll come back to that. And they're moving often in lockstep, and you end up just with a bunch of chords, one after another. And the tempo of the piece being pretty slow makes it a lot blockier as well. And there's also, unfortunately, a wide range, for me at least, of tempos. There's like a range of 10 beats per minute where some parts sound best to me on the slower side of things and some parts on the faster side of things. And although you can obviously vary the tempo of a piece, 10 beats per minute is a lot. It is a lot. So I don't have a great solution for all this stuff. I unfortunately still don't play this piece the way that I really feel it, the way that I hear it. But I think I'm on the right path. So let's talk about the solutions to this blockiness problem. First of all is the tempo, micro variations in the tempo. I don't mean those big changes of 10 beats per minute. I mean smaller changes. So for example, right at the beginning, every either resolution or harmony change, chord change, can come with a little bit of holding back. So for example, doom, bom, 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 bom. I exaggerated there. Again, I'm exaggerating, but to get the idea of what I'm talking about. If you were to play it very strictly, it would sound like this. And with these small variations, micro variations in tempo, it's not as, I think it reduces the blockiness because we're not expecting, we are expecting these chords one after another, but with a small variation in rhythm, it gives us, I don't know, a little pause. Something like that. That one sounded good. And now we can fall back into a strict tempo. There's obviously a danger with doing this because it can sound a little too seasick. I mean, I exaggerated quite a lot in these examples. And to get the feeling of that seasickness, if every other chord comes with a slowing down of the tempo, you just lose all sense of rhythm. So you do need to do this pretty carefully. Maybe in the parts that just come out to you a little more blocky and they don't sound very, very good. So for me, for example, the most important one is here in the first measure at, so I guess it's from the 3rd to the 4th, 8th note, from here to here. There I always put in a little bit of slowing down of the tempo. That was the easy part. Well, applying it to make it musical is very difficult, but at least technically it's not that hard. The much more difficult part technically to reducing of the blockiness is to individualize each of these voices, and this is where it's so difficult. There are 4 voices in this piece, but let's do one simplification. There's actually really only 3. There's the bass, there's the melody, do-do-do-do-do, and then there's the 2 inner voices, which thankfully for us, almost always move in lockstep. They're almost always together. So you can think of it as, I've got the melody up here, I've got the bass over here, and then these 2 together form the one inner voice. Right? So I got my melody up here, and then these ones form the inner voice. But even with this simplification, 3 voices is still a lot. And trying to individualize each one, especially when they're moving so often in lockstep, where it's just chord after chord after chord, you really need to have your chord technique down so that you can, make one part of the chord a little louder or a little softer, but not just that. Each voice, each note of the chord that forms part of the voice has a different onset and offset. So again, let's take this example. In the first measure from the from the fourth to the fifth, eighth note. We're going from this chord, this B flat minor, to this chord, this E flat minor 7. But consider that we have those three different voices. So maybe the bass note, we want to have a little pause between each pulse of the bass note. So when we're moving from this chord to this chord, maybe the bass note, we lift it off a little bit earlier, and then we move the rest of the chords, the notes. Maybe the melody, we want to make it as legato as possible. So here in the melody, we want to have almost no pause between them. And then maybe on the inner voices, we want it to be somewhere in the middle. So in this kind of contrived example, imagine that we're going from this chord to this chord, but the bass voice moves first, and then we go off of the middle voice, and then finally the upper voice. Not just the offset as in when we move off of a voice, but also when the voices come together. Maybe on the second chord, we don't want them all to come down together. Maybe we want the melody to come down first and then the other two voices together. Again, this is a contrived example, but the point is you need to individualize each voice. Each one has a life of its own. And when there's three of them, when the rhythm is the pulse is very slow, and when the texture is so blocky, so chord-based, it is incredibly difficult to individualize them. Not just because of the technique, but also the amount of, and here's the secret to playing anything that's really contrapuntal, but honestly, even something that's not contrapuntal, even a nocturne. I forgot those chords. You have three voices over here. You got the melody, you got the bass, and you got these harmonies over here. You need to be locked into each one, hear each of them individually and all of them together. Now, in a very contrapuntal piece like this Bach Prelude, it's that much more difficult. It requires such an immense amount of concentration. If you've ever done meditation, like what's it called? Mindfulness? In any case, one of the first things you do is you try to close your eyes and focus on your breath, and without your mind moving to somewhere else, or if it does move somewhere else and instead of staying focused on the breath, you start thinking about something else, you immediately pull it back on the breath. Try to do that 10 times. Try to go 10 breaths in and out with your concentration being just on that breath. It is very difficult. It took me a while to get there. And you need that same level of concentration for this, for individualizing each voice so that you can focus on each one separately and also put them together. Very hard, but very rewarding. When it comes off, when it gets pulled off, it's very, very rewarding. One good thing is that you can practice this very, very slowly. That helps you concentrate on each voice to really hear each one. Maybe not that slow, but you can start that slow. So that's a good thing. That will help with individualizing them, although it's a little harder to concentrate so much. Paradoxically, actually playing at tempo is a little harder to concentrate because you're moving ultimately still pretty fast through all the chords, so you can kind of almost lose your concentration quicker if you're moving faster than if you're going very slowly, and you really have time to dig into each of the voices. Okay, the rest of the piece, last point of here, the rest of the piece, except for this beginning two measures, and also when it repeats here in the penultimate, the two measures of the last 5 measures tune, when we're on the F major, those are very similar. If you can focus on those and get those down, I think the rest of the piece falls into place, because the rest of the piece is a little less blocky. There's a lot of motion. Those are 2 blocks, but now motion, chords, motion, chords, motion. So these 16th notes make it a little less blocky. It's a little easier to play. But in the first two measures, and then when it repeats at the end with on the F major chord, if you can pull that off, individualize each voice, especially this bass one, which just repeats, very, very difficult to make it interesting. You work on those micro variations in tempo. If you can pull off those two sections of the piece, I think the rest falls into place. Two more things to talk about very briefly. The pedal and arpeggios. Let's start with the easy one, arpeggios. It helps if you think of the harpsichord, or you know how to play the harpsichord, or you have a mode on your piano to do the harpsichord. I think quite often on the harpsichord, chords were rolled. It was especially big chords. And you can use this technique of rolling a chord, of arpeggiating a chord, to punctuate. Usually it works best, I find, at harmonic resolution. So between the first and actually at the end of the opening section, when we're going from the F major and we're starting our melody, do do do, or between the first and the second measure when we're going from here. Doesn't that sound nice? So you can strategically use these rolls, these arpeggiations, to punctuate important parts of the piece. The trickier part is the pedal. So, oh man, pedal. I think it's important on a modern piano to use the pedal for this piece, just very strategically, when you really do want a legato and it's just too impossible to do it with the fingers. You'll find that a lot of the parts in the piece work very well even if they're not a true legato. So do try to practice the piece without any pedal at all, and as needed add in a pedal when it's just something is missing and you really need to get that nice legato. Be very careful about the pedal, because especially on a very good piano, the difference in resonance is so big between the dry sound and the wet sound with the pedal down. It can sound very, very jarring. So very light touches of the pedal just to get a legato where you need it, and try to undo the resonance that happens when you have the pedal down and you're playing chords, because it really is too jarring. On this piano, although it's a very good piano, it's still a digital piano, and the difference in resonance is not as big. So I think I unfortunately use the pedal a little more, too much. On the other hand, I mean, it works for this instrument, but I don't think it would translate to a very good grand piano, for example. But again, try to go without the pedal, and as needed, once you really understand the piece and how it sounds without any pedal, when you need to make a true legato, well, I guess it's a fake legato, but when you need to make a legato, use the pedal with a very light touch just to tie the notes together. Okay, that's it for this piece. Very, very beautiful. I don't want to give up on it. The parts that are great are just way too wonderful, and I do think I'm getting closer and closer to playing it the way that I hear it in my head. And again, the secret, try some way or another to reduce the blockiness of the prelude. All right, let's play it. Okay.